So, for our very first Outside the Pegs interview on the Grasstrack Banter Podcast, I'd like to introduce a man who's done an awful lot in the sport, I think it's fair to say. He's ridden solos to European and world long track level over the last 30 years or so. In more recent times, he's turned his hand to 500 sidecars and has twice finished on the podium in the European Championships on three wheels. He's now recognised as one of the country's very best 500cc sidecar competitors, and also he's organised some brilliant grass track meetings in the past, most notably the Kings of Speed. And he's been a key player in launching the phenomenon that is Pit Bike Speedway in Iwade, and now it's taken off in Eastbourne as well. This year, sadly, has been the last year that Mitch has decided to organise the charity karting event down at Buckmore, but that's been super successful as well. And also he's been the manager of Team GB at the World Team Long Track Championships and even managed to win the championship as well as the manager. His surname's one of the most famous in track racing engineering. I think we've just about covered everything, Mitch. Mitch Godden, welcome to the Grasstrack Banter Podcast.
Hi everyone. It's a bit of a strange thing for me, but it's been an absolute pleasure for you to ask me to do this, and hopefully we can shed some light on a few things and make something a little bit interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just another way for us to connect with all the people that watch Grasstrack and invest their time in it, and hopefully they enjoy hearing some of your thoughts on some of the things that we're going to talk about. But First of all, I'd just like to ask, we'll start off by talking about your dad, I think, because obviously everyone knows the name Don Godden, and it's still a famous name in our sport even now. So when you first started racing, was it sort of in your mind a little bit that you had to live up to your dad's name?
It was a little bit. I mean, I didn't start racing until I was probably nearly 17, so I didn't have the whole youth scene particularly. But I was around racing my whole life. The amount of times I've been to places like Herxheim and Schaessel and the one-day world finals. I knew racing. Racing was I got enough out of going to watch racing. Never really considered it for me as a sport, to be honest, because we went to all these places. We went to the Speedway World Finals and the Long Track World Finals and the qualifying rounds, and it was a great time to be involved in going to watch it. From as a youngster growing up, through the teenage years. So it wasn't particularly difficult, although there was I suppose, what would you call it, an era of sort of expectation, which was slightly difficult. But it didn't take long, really, and I established myself as myself, which I think it was an important thing to do.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've noticed sort of since you've been riding, you've always ridden number 9, and obviously your dad very famously rode 29. Was that a deliberate thing?
Yeah, it was. It was my choice. Dad never put any pressure on me at all, and I didn't want to ride 29. I have ridden it on occasions, but it's just a number to me. My number's just a number. If someone else wants it, then they can have it. It really doesn't. I'm not superstitious about things. It doesn't really bother me much. It's quite useful not to be changing them every week because it's a bit of a pain. But the UK scene is different to Europe. Generally in Europe, you might have a different number every week. That's something that you just live with. So I'm not that bothered about numbers particularly. But when I started, I didn't want to be number 29. I wanted to sort of plough my own furrow and ride number 9. And that was that, really. So, yeah, it was a conscious decision, but it didn't mean too much.
Well, I think you definitely sort of made your own name, really. And we'll sort of get onto that in a minute. But just finally, being a lifelong grass tracker like yourself, like we all are, means that you've seen a lot come and go, I guess. What's your sort of earliest memories, if you think back? What's your earliest memories of Grasstrack?
Well, back in sort of 91, 92, I think, I can't really, it must have been about 92. I mean, I can remember Dad coming home and he had these two 250 Grasstrack bikes. And it was like, wow, what are we going to do with them? And he said, well, we'll see, kind of thing. And I think they came out of someone's shed somewhere, and I think Dad paid like 250 quid for the pair of them. And then we advertised, we decided which one we wanted to keep, and he advertised the other one and sold the other one for 250 quid. So the bike that we had effectively owed us nothing. So we completely stripped it and rebuilt it, and I think Roy Simmons did the engine, and it was a Honda Red Rocket. It later turned out that it used to be Jeremy Doncaster's Red Rocket. So it had some form, And we rode that for a good year or year and a half, 2 years. And it was good at the time. And when the tracks, as I was starting out and the tracks were beginning of the year and the end of the year where it was quite sort of slippery and wet, it would hold its own. But in the summer months, like the modern 250s with the water-cooled frames and stuff, basically just left it for dead. But I've got vivid memories of my first ever time I rode it. We went to a little track, I think it was the Southeastern Juniors or Kitchener or something like that, down at Brooklands on New Romney. And we did some practice, and it was quite rough and bumpy and sort of a few molehills everywhere. We went out for our first ride, and I absolutely smashed it. And I came in and I can remember saying to Dad, I was like, well, if this is Grasstrack, this is a piece of cake, really. And he said, well, control yourself a little bit and, let's see how it goes. So, we went out for the next ride, and then I can't quite remember who they were. I'm sure they do. But they absolutely blew me away. They blew me into the weeds. And when we came back, I was sort of scratching my head a bit, and I couldn't understand from the first race to the second race what had gone wrong. And it turned out that these 250 lads were running their engines in the first race, and come the second race, they gave it full beans, and literally blew me away. So that was it was quite I learned some lessons on the very first day, and try and be a little bit more modest and try and control yourself, and it's not over till the end kind of thing, but it was great. And that's probably my first memory of actually riding Grasstrack. Previous to that, it was being a fan or being there with my dad at sort of championship events. So, but it was great. It was a great first memory, and it was a very early starting block to what's been quite a long career.
Yeah, it has been a long career. I think that people just, you said there sort of 92, 93. I think people forget how long you've sort of been riding. I know that before we don't want to sort of say that you're old. I'm certainly not getting at that, but you definitely been around a long time. But it doesn't feel like as long as it has been. I mean, 30 years, it's a long time. And there's a lot to cover in your career, but of all the things that you did in your solo career, what do you think the highlight was?
It's that was sort of 25 years of my life, so it's hard to make a highlight. Some of the special moments. There was a track in Germany called Wolfegg, and I rode it. I can't remember when. It was something like 2004, 2005. And I really enjoyed. I didn't have a brilliant day, but I really, really enjoyed it. And the track was like a kind of like a mini Rhodes Mini, some off cambers and some sort of crests down the straights and stuff. And it just really suited my style. And I went back there in 2007 and I won the meeting. And then they only ran every 2 years, and I went there in 2009 and I won the meeting, and I went there in 2011 and I won the meeting. So to win the kind of the Wolfegg Triple Crown was very, very special. The last one in 2011 was sort of 2 or 3 weeks after Dad had died, and it was special. And no other rider had ever finished on the podium. They ran probably for 10 or 12 events over the years, and no other rider had ever finished on the podium twice. So to go there and win it 3 times on the bounce was very special. And but then there's other things. I mean, last year at Tetro to win the handicap race at Tetro was, a lifetime goal. I remember coming away from Tetro a few years ago, and I rang Trevor Banks on the way home and said, Trevor, I've got a podium in me. I know I've got a podium in me. I can do it, And the next year we went there, we won it, and it was an amazing race with Coops. It was the handicap race is the big race at Tetro. I'd led it. I think Dave Mears led it at the beginning, and I passed Dave on lap 2. And held on to it to the last corner. Coops came underneath me really, really hard. I kind of knew he was coming, and I managed to cut back and pass him over the line, which was a fantastic end to a brilliant race at Tetro. And that's one of the highlights of a solo career. There's so many, there's a lot of the highlights aren't really from racing. They're some of them are from the journeys that we've had, with Trevor and Vincent and with Super Dave, and the laughs and the mucking around, and they're the best bits sometimes. It's not about the standing on the podium listening to the national anthem brings a tear to your eye. There's no doubt about that. But some of the best times has been in the van. and that's the truth.
Yeah, I think that all of us that go to Grasstrack know there's an awful lot more to it than just the racing. I think that's what keeps us going, really. But the two meetings you talked about there, Wolfegg and Tetero, both really quite far away from lots of people what they think of when they think of German grass tracks, or speedway long tracks. I mean, they think of these great big smooth tracks. Obviously, Tetero is big, but it's certainly not smooth. And Wolfegg's undulating, and I remember you going real good at the Masters when it was at Rhodes Minnis as well. You did have a few good rides at Collier Street, which was a bit more smooth. But do you think that you sort of suit the more interesting sort of track?
Well, it's quite funny you should say that, because I had, on solo racing, I had a very, what they call, traditional style. It was, leg forward, going in hard and steering on the front tyre. I was never, I'd say a wild rider. I didn't have my style. The traditional style wasn't that of Lewis Denham or Tim Nobes or Phil Ambrose or that, those kind of leg back kind of guys. And as in the early days, I used to get upset because I could never find decent pictures. You go around to Pete and Pearl's photos, or whoever's doing pictures at the time, and you see these wild guys with it all hanging out and the bike in the air and they're hanging off the bloody thing, and my pictures were all very, very much planted into the corner. And you think, I just want a decent picture to put somewhere or give someone, and it didn't happen. But that was indicative of the style that I had, But then with that style, it had its benefits, and it had its benefits on certain tracks. Especially the Dutch tracks, which tended to be deeper, and some of the German tracks that were what I'd say a little bit difficult to ride. I mean, I had a little bit of a nickname in Germany. They used to call me the Scheissebahn specialist, which in English is the not so good track specialist. Because we'd travel hours and hours and hours and hours to get somewhere, and then perhaps it might rain, and the local guys and the Germans and the Dutch lads would be quite happy to go home, and I was always one for saying, no, look, we've come here, we've got dirty, we don't want to go home, we want to race, we want to do it. When the track's got a little bit choppy or a little bit deep or a little bit bumpy, that's where I sort of came into my element, really. And it was nice in a way, because you developed a reputation, and that's not something that it's not something that is easy to do at home. When you've put that much effort into going somewhere, you do try that a bit more, you do try that a bit harder. It is a long way home, and you want to go home buzzing about the day, not moaning about the fact that the track was no good. So that level of effort was always higher once you've travelled, once you've done the distance, and you've done the miles, and you've done the crossing, and you've spent the money on the diesel and everything else. You had to get a result, and that was a big part of it. But I'd like to have done more 1,000-meter racing, but it really is a different sport. Once people think that it's just the same, it's just a big track. It's not. The technique and the track craft is completely different on 1,000-meter racing. And I wish I'd done some more of it, really, but it never really came to me on two wheels. Things are slightly different now, but that was then. But the track that towards the end of my solo career, it became sort of more important to choose the places that you wanted to go, not just go where someone offered you a contract, or go, if you had semi-finals for a European Championship or a World Qualifier. I had to particularly choose what would be suitable for me, because I couldn't qualify at places like Tyac that were, basically a big speedway track that lent themselves to that sort of wild style. It didn't work for me. Tyac and Artigues and places like that in France, and a few places in Germany. So I had to pick and choose what was best for me, really.
Saying you've given up the solos now? Is that it for the solos?
Well, no, not really.
Never say never.
If someone asked me, if someone asked me, what do I do? I ride motorbikes, and it doesn't really matter. I think in our country, we're not too phased whether you go out on a solo or a sidecar. I mean, at the Poacher this year, I rode both. And I know people like Rob Bradley, who would ride both at a meeting and things like that. In Europe, it's a bit different. You're either one or the other. And I can remember a couple of years ago, there was a Dutch club was looking for riders or struggling for riders, and they'd rung Dave, and Dave said, "Well, look, Mitch will do it." And they said, "No, he's a sidecar rider. He can't do it." And I'm just a racer. I don't really, if the sidecars there's not a meeting on that weekend, then we'll go on the solo or we'll go on the pit bike or whatever. I just like racing. It's just that over the last 5 or so years, we've gone in a particular direction, but I've still done Tetra every year. I mean, this year, obviously, I did the Poacher as well, which was, great feeling as well. So
yeah, I think that you came to the Poacher and put in a decent performance as well, and I think that lots of people thought that you're definitely in this country, your solo career was done, and then you got to the Poacher and rode pretty good. But again, it's another track that catches out some of those speedway style solo riders, and obviously you were able to ride it's cleaner on it.
It's a bit grippy. It's fast, which I don't. I've got no problems about going fast. It's a bit grippy, and you have to ride it a little bit on the front tyre. And the Poacher always suited me pretty good. The kind of thing, the thing was, like, I've seen the Masters results over the last couple of years, and I thought, blimey, if I was still riding, I'd easily make the top 8 or I'd easily make the top 10. And, you can say it the first year and you can say it the second year and you can say it the third year. Then all of a sudden you kind of doubt yourself and you think, well, do you know what? I need to prove this. Not to anybody else, just to myself. And Reg came up to me at Wimborne, and he was struggling for some riders because there was other events in Europe on the same day. And I said, look, Reg, I'll do it. I said, I haven't got an engine. If I can borrow an engine, I'll do it. I'll ride both classes. And Reg was well happy with that. And I went to Gary at Godden Engineering, and I said to Gary if I could borrow an engine. Anyway, so Gary said, yep, no problem. So I borrowed the engine, put it in my old twin shock solo bike, which was always like my old armchair, and went there and had a great day. I think we finished third equal on points with Coops, and it was a real shame that the finals didn't happen, but I'd done a fair few races that day riding both classes, so I'd done a few laps. Let's put it that way.
I think that you did both, and you obviously aren't saying that you've given up the solo, but for most of us watching, I mean, you were always a decent solo rider, but you've come to the sidecar class, and it turns out you're really handy on a sidecar. So what was it that sort of turned you to the sidecars in the first place?
Well, I've always quite liked them, and they always had a bit of a soft spot with Dad. And I can remember years and years and years ago, being at a meeting as a little boy somewhere and flicking the mud out of Nick Radley's rear tyre and jumping on his bike and doing the parade lap with him and kind of stuff like that. When I think Nick was sponsored by Dad, and not when you're abroad, you don't really get chance. I didn't really get a chance to pay much attention to the guys that were over there. Obviously, you saw them around, but you were doing your thing and they're doing their thing, And then a few years ago, I think it was about 2009 or 2010, I was just in the garden mowing, and I heard a bike or an engine start up over the track at Collier Street, and it's only like one field away. So I jumped in the car and went round there, and Josh was there with Mal Goodwin and Bob Rand, and it was Josh's first time on the 500 sidecar. I think he had Aidan on the side, Aidan Kingsmill, I think. Anyway, Josh had done a few laps, and he looked very good, and I think Josh scared Aidan a little bit, and then Bob said to me, or is it Bob or Mal said to me, do you fancy a go? And I was in my jeans and a hoodie and had a crash helmet in the back of the car, and I jumped on. I said, well, who's going to get on the side? And Josh said, well, I will. So it wasn't on the full track at Collier Street. It was kind of on the inside grass around the inside of the circuit. And I said, right, are you sure? He went, yeah. So Josh has jumped on, and I didn't really know what I was doing. We went round, and I sort of had a sort of slow lap, and then I cracked it on, and I kept looking under my arm to make sure his legs were still there, and we just it felt so comfortable, and it felt right. That was the answer. And Josh was shouting, and I thought he was telling me to go faster. And anyway, if 2 or 3 laps later, we've stopped, and he apparently was telling me to stop. but it was great, and I had a pocket full of mud. I was in my jeans, and I thought, do you know what, this is. If someone asked me to describe it, I'd say it felt dangerously normal. It felt natural, and that was then, And I couldn't have predicted where we would be now. It wasn't my thing. It wasn't what I intended to do. It's just where we've ended up.
That, across the season, it's fair to say that obviously William Mathiassen's still the man, and is Markus Brandhofer, is it the other real quick German? But
Marcus Venus is the number one
Venus,
German.
Yeah.
And, but Brandhofer's close behind him in second. Yeah.
And then yourself and Josh are all well in amongst it as well. So I think that there's lots of things to come for that. And the second that you got in 2018, and then third again this year, has sort of proven that, really.
Well, it goes a bit further back than that, really. I wanted to do the first meeting we did was in 2014 at Danebury. Basically, the long and short of it was that Natasha was running a pub at the time in the village of Collier Street. And I can't really remember much about the particular day, but it was a hot summer's day, and we'd had a few drinks, and the challenge came down that I wouldn't ride a sidecar. And I said, look, let's get all the big meetings out of the way. Let's get the contracts finished. If there's a meeting that comes up, we'll do it. I'll pay for the entry. I'll pay for the fuel. I'll pay for a tyre. We'll go and do it. And of course, when you've had a few drinks, it was maybe a little bit of Dutch courage, or but that's what happened. And then come the end of 2014, this meeting at Danebury happened to be there. So I said to Natasha, I said, right, come on, are we going to do this or what? And she said, yeah, we'll do it. And that was it, really. And I didn't, I entered the meeting and I went down there the night before, super excited about it. But, to be honest with you, I didn't know that, I wasn't 100% sure that Natasha was going to arrive and the bike was going to arrive. And, I didn't realise how serious they were going to take it, So I took the solos with me as well. And when they arrived on Sunday morning and the bike came out and the tent came out and the tools came out and the spare wheels came out and this and that and everything else, I thought, blimey, they've put a lot of effort into this, on my behalf, and I really, really appreciate that. So I said to, I think it was Rachel that was running the event, I said, look, I'm not going to ride the solo today. I need to give this 100% of my time for, just to cover the fact that they've put so much effort into doing it. And it turned out that they'd been in the dark, in the workshop, not in the workshop, but in the dark on Bob Brand's drive, putting the engine in the night before. And I said, look, if you'd have rung me, I'd have come and helped. But anyway, they all turned up and we did the meeting, and the long and short of the meeting was that we won the meeting. And then the cogs started turning, and Gary Southgate, who helps me immensely through my solo career towards the later days, had come from 500 sidecars, and he'd said, there'd been a few bikes for sale. Gary had said to me, look, come on, let's buy a bike. And I was like, no, Gary, come on. It's not my thing, I'm a solo rider. I'm not a sidecar rider. I'm not going to do this. Anyway, he was twisting my arm. And in the end, we went halves on a bike from Holland from Mark Detz. And that's the key to where it all started, really. In 2015, we only intended to do, I was still racing solos. I was still in the European Championships in 15. We only intended to do a couple of sidecar meetings as some fun. But then Sean came along with the Super Series. So that couple of meetings turned into sort of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. And then, the balance, if you like, the equilibrium between the two classes started to change. So, yeah, it was always enjoyable. And, it was great to be doing what you know so well, but learning everything again. And that has, made it really exciting, meeting new people, meeting people that you knew but you didn't really know, making new friends and learning so much more. And the thing with the sidecars as well is they're so much more technical than with the solo. A good bloke on a bad bike on a solo can still make everyone look silly, but with a sidecar there's so much more setup and knowledge that you need to know, but it's all available and it's all there to learn. So it's been great.
I think one of the things that you would say is key to your success on the sidecar is your passenger Paul Smith. I know that every time you've won anything, you've always credited Paul with the part he plays in the team, and he's been riding with you 5 years now, is it?
The thing with Paul was obviously he was Cookie's passenger, and then late into 2015, Natasha was. The basic situation with the bike was that I was doing the Super Series and a couple of meetings with Natasha in England, and because it was half Gary's bike, if there was not a meeting in England, Natasha was the driver with Kira, Gary's daughter, as the passenger. So they were doing meetings, B licence meetings abroad when I wasn't using the bike in England. And then there was an occasion where we were both had events on the same day in different countries, which was a bit of a mix-up. So the long and short of it was we ended up buying a second bike from Mark Detz, which the girls had, and then I had the second bike and the girls kept the first bike either way. And then there was a meeting in towards the end of 2015 at Ledbury, and I'd asked Paul, knowing that Tony had got injured at Cornwall during the Super Series round. I was stuck for a passenger, and I asked Paul, and Paul asked Tony's permission, which is the right thing to do, and Tony was really cool with it. And Paul had came and jumped on, and we won every race that day. We won every race and won the final, and it was a brilliant day. And it was kind of like it was sowing the seed, really. It wasn't, it was never my intention for Paul to be my passenger. I didn't really know what Natasha was doing at the time, but it turned out that Cookie was packing up and Paul was going to pack up as well. And when I asked him, come the winter time, Natasha had said to me that she didn't want to be the passenger anymore. She wanted to, just be the pilot. I had to find someone, and Paul was the only guy I'd ridden with. So I asked him, and at first his sort of reaction was, well, no, I'm packing up, and I've told my wife I'm packing up, and that's it. But I think the event at Ledbury that we had and the fun that we had kind of, maybe turned him a little bit. And, he said, right, okay, well, we'll do it, providing it's not too many meetings. How many meetings do you plan to do? I said, 10 or 12. He said, right, okay, my wife's happy with that. We'll do it. He said, but you've got 2 years. That's all you got is 2 years. And that was in 2016. So we've got 16, 17, 18 and 19 so far. And, so we've had 4 years at it, which was pretty good out of the original two.
He's still on for next
year. Yeah, we're going strong. It's difficult. There are certain things that are difficult. Paul lives in Peterborough. I live down in Kent. We don't have, the opportunity that we have to work on the bike and talk about the bike, and, is at weekends, is on the journeys, is at the race time. So, but that's great. I've always done when I had the solos, or still have the solos, I always do the bikes myself. I have from day one. So that's not an issue for me particularly. And it allows Paul to, concentrate on work and family life, and then obviously we go away at weekends. And it is, last year it got difficult. There was sort of 8 or 9 or 10 meetings on the bounce. And when, after sort of 5 or 6 of them, it does become a slog, when you're at Dover every weekend, or you're on, you're going through Luxembourg every weekend, or, it does become a bit of a chore when you're doing it every weekend. And that's just the time and the effort, the physical effort that it takes. But you wouldn't change it. It's racing.
Yeah, it's obviously we know that you race abroad quite often, and that's probably half the reason why you've come on so quick. But just moving away from your own career for a second, and on the podcast this week we've been talking about the Sandace finishing, and I know that the Sandace, you won it a few times, and you were there right at the beginning when it all started to take off, and now seemingly it's all over. So sort of what are your thoughts on the end of the Sandace?
I've got kind of a mixed feelings about it, really, because not about it finishing at all, but about the whole thing. Fortunately, I was there the first one in 2006, and originally I was going with Trevor Banks. We were going to go together, but Trevor, that's the year that Trevor hurt his knee at Tetro, and that effectively ended Trevor's career. He didn't know that at the time, but that's what happened. So I was going to go with Trevor. Obviously, Trevor had to allow, and me and my dad went on our own. And the first time we went, it was such a breath of fresh air. We'd never been to Guernsey before, never been to any of the Channel Islands before, and to go there and experience really enthusiastic people that really wanted you to be there. You was part of their big day, and it was great, and it was so relaxed as well. I can remember standing there on the on the beach, down the slip. And they gave a rider's briefing. They said, all right, fellas, you don't hit the cones. If you hit the cones on the next lap, we're going to throw them at you. And if you go too wide on one side, you're going to be in the water. And if you go too wide on the other side, you're going to be in the wall. Apart from that, fellas, have a great day. And it was just such a breath of fresh air. Just that, relaxed, chilled environment, just to go out and ride your bike and enjoy it and let your hair down. on the beach was amazing. And that was the same. I mean, I won it in 2006 and 2007. In 2008, the local guy called Anthony Kurapul won it, which was great for the event, great for Guernsey sport, and great for the event because a hometown boy had won it, and it was great for the headlines. And I was going for the triple. Anthony won it, and then the next year, it was all about, can I take it back? Is he going to keep it? Fortunately, I won 6, 7, 8. I think I won 9, 10, and 11. So 5 in total. And then it changed a bit. In 2012, it was made an ACU championship, and then all of a sudden, that fun, relaxed atmosphere did change. And that unfortunately that was just going to happen. It did change a bit, and it did get a bit more serious. And whereas we were taking engines that they were due for a service, but we'd go and do the beach race on them just before we serviced them, so we weren't it wasn't wasting their life effectively by the damage that can happen on the beach, which does happen on occasion. But then it changed as soon as it became a British Championship. People were having engines done for the beach. And all of a sudden, the whole fun side of it, that sort of ethos changed. Things can't stay the same forever. And I think I rode in 2013. I had a big crash on the beach and broke my back. I think I went back in 2014, and then things have changed, and I left it alone a few years. But what's happened now, is massively sad, because I know that the guys, the organisers have put so much effort, so much of their life and passion into organising that race. It seems crazy that it's just imploded.
Yeah, we talked about it, and we said we can see both sides of the argument, in as much that the motocrossers, they support the other 10 or 9 rounds of the year, and we can see where they're coming from. But to lose such a meeting that seemed to be just gathering momentum, I know they were a bit unlucky with dates a few times, so they didn't quite get the riders that they wanted, but it was still a special meeting, and just a real shame to see it go.
Yeah, it was, and I can remember Mike Clark ringing me a few times, and he'd say, right, I've had so and so wants to do it, what do you think? And I said, well, yeah, okay, Mike, he's a bit wild, maybe see if he'll come for a test first, or other guys, I'd say, right, yeah, he's definitely good enough. He's competent enough. He's a great guy to have. I put Mike in touch with Christian Halshorst from Ludinghausen, and Christian went over there once or twice. And the fact that myself and a few of the other sort of higher profile guys done it from the start definitely helped it. Because we came home completely, enthused and enthralled by the experience that we'd had, and we were talking about it. And the next year, after the first year, Adam Filmer was there, and Martin Sturgeon was there, and guys from my neck of the woods, and it was great. We had some great times.
Although the Sand Ace has gone, the club is such a welcoming club, and all the people on the island are so welcoming to anybody. I think even if anybody wanted to get over to any of the meetings that they run every year, I think you'd be welcomed with open arms still. So, shame to see the Sand Ace go, but the Guernsey Motorcycle and Light Car Club carry on, and they'll run their 10 rounds this year, and we'll hopefully see something rise from the ashes.
It's a shame. It's a real shame that they couldn't, develop some sort of compromise between the crossers and the sliders. Unfortunately, you can't beat the tide. They've got a 3-hour window to run a meeting. I can remember when I crashed and I broke my back. I was in the ambulance, and the ambulance was sat on the beach, and I wanted to get up. I wanted to walk away because I didn't want to hold the meeting up, because I knew how much it meant to Mike and the others, And I was in the back of the ambulance, and I said to the ambulance guys, I said, look, I want to stand up. And they said, well, you can't. I was on a stretcher board. I said, look, honestly, I know my own body. I want to stand up to see, where it hurts, if it hurts, can I, the long shot was the rerun. And they made me sign a piece of paper that said that if I hurt myself any further by my actions, it was my own responsibility, which I signed. And I got myself off the bed, and I stood up in the back of the ambulance, and I immediately knew that I needed to lay down. And I was conscious of the fact that I didn't want to hold the meeting up, because I knew that just the effort that they'd put in was immense, and it just, maybe there was a compromise, available. Maybe the motocrosser guys could have had some sort of championship where the top 8 went to the Sand Ace. Maybe instead of having 24 solos, sliders. They could have had 16, and they could have, I think not enough work was done between themselves to solve the problem.
No, and I mean it's sort of all we can say on that matter, really. I guess it's just we hope that something grows out of it in the future. So finally, the last thing I need to talk about really is the elephant in the room. Really, last year at the British Championships, the 500 sidecars, it was, well, first of all, it was a tremendous day's racing between yourselves and Josh Goodwin and Liam Brown, and later Sean Harvey and Danny Hogg as well. And it was just a brilliant day's racing all round, really. But it ended in a really controversial situation whereby nobody really knew the outcome of what had happened. There'd been one ruling, there'd been some protests and all sorts going on, but the upshot of it was that it was decided that yourselves and Josh Goodwin and Liam Brown were excluded from the result of the final, giving the British Championships to Sean Harvey and Danny Hogg. But it wasn't a great ending for anybody, really. But I know that lots of people want to hear your thoughts on that, the events of that day.
Yeah, I've got no problems talking about it. Leading up to, as the day went, I'd won. I talk for me and Smudge. We'd won our first two heats. Josh and Liam had won their first two heats. In the third heat, we met, and in the fourth heat, we met. Now, when I'm racing, I'm always working out points. I'm trying to think ahead. I'm not looking at the corner. I'm looking at the next corner, and my brain's going, 10th of the dozen. I knew that for the European Championship qualification, it was done at the intermediate stage after the heats. So the final was just effectively for a British title. The points after the heats was what decided who goes into the seeded positions in the European Championships and who goes into the qualifying positions. So the fact that Josh and myself went into that third leg tied on points, I kind of knew the fact that I could drop a point to him because it all came down to the last race. If you won the third leg and you didn't win the last race, you'd finish second. And if you come second in the third race, but you won the last race, you were then first. And that's what happened. Josh and Liam won the third leg, and in the fourth leg, Smudge and I won it. So effectively, after the four heats, we were tied on points, but we were on countback the winners of the event as regards the qualification for Europe. So that's the main thing. That was the main thing for us, and to get that out of the way. And then when it comes to the final, it's a race to be the British champion. It was a difficult, when you're there on the day, you don't get a chance to think about things in depth, and you just we had first choice for the grid. We chose where we wanted to go. They chose where they wanted to go, and the others went wherever they did. Come the start tapes, they made a better start. But we'd looked at the track before the final. The inside line really kind of suited a different tyre. The inside line suited a speedway tyre, which I think is what Sean went for. But the problem with the speedway tyre is it doesn't jump out the start as good. So I looked at the track and I said, and Paul came with me, and we looked and we discussed it between ourselves, and we decided, right, we're going to go with a 22-inch normal tyre, but we're going to take a tooth off and we're going to go for the loose because the 22 wasn't going to work around the inside. So we'd kind of decided before the final where we were going to ride and what our aim was, but you don't know what you're going to do until you get to the first corner, because you're not sure, you don't know before the race whether you're going to be in the first position or second position or wherever. So you kind of got to, the cards fall as they did, and Josh and Liam led it, but we had this, we had massive amount of speed, and riding the lines that we rode, we were able to sort of gain the ground, work them out, and make a move. But with, one thing I've got to say is with the 500 sidecars, it's much harder to be the lead of a pair of sidecars that are dueling for a race win. It's much harder to be the one in the front because you're so conscious of leaving holes open. You want to be on the dirt line, but you can't leave the inside open. You've got to protect the inside, you've got to protect the outside. It's much easier to be the guy in second, and effectively the guy in second can control the race. The year before at Chelmsford, I think, or it might have been a Super Series around there, it was the other way around. We led it, and Josh worked us out, and Josh passed us on the last corner. So I don't really want to go into too much what happened in that last corner or on that lap, but it wasn't pleasant. We'd sewn up the fact that we're the number one seed for 2020. That was done before the final. Without the pressure of Europe on your shoulders, you're just going out all hell for leather to try and win. And within reason, you've got you need to respect yourselves and you need to respect the people around you. And going into that corner, I'd had a really fast line the corner before, ran the outside. As we came up the straight, Josh moved from the inside to the outside because he thought we were coming. He left a hole up the inside. I went for the inside and I made the pass. Up until that point, there was no issues. Obviously, certain things happened. Josh didn't know they were happening. I didn't know they were happening. Paul didn't know they were happening, and we've all ended up in a big pile. We were excluded. Josh was excluded. Josh protested his exclusion. I protested my exclusion. We never protested each other. I haven't got a problem with Joshua. I haven't got a problem with many things, really. It's just a shame that when we've put that much effort into our racing, when we put that many miles under on the van, when you've put that much heart and soul into it, that and you try and go to these meetings and you operate in a professional manner and you try and control yourself and you try and do the best you can, that sometimes the decisions aren't quite as professional as the effort that we're putting in. But that's, unfortunately, to be the clerk of the course or to be the assistant clerk of the course or to be any official, I wouldn't want to do that job. I take my hat off to all of them that put themselves forward to do that job, because it's a horrendous amount of pressure from people like me that are just single-mindedness about winning, and the decisions got made. We didn't agree with them. They didn't agree with them, but that's life.
Yeah, that's life. That's racing. Hopefully, we can sort of put it behind us now, and changes have been made to the rule book and changes have been made to the way that the meetings run to try and make sure that we can move forward as a sport, really, and make sure that this sort of thing can't really happen again.
If what happened has highlighted some issues or some potential issues or some problems that need clarifying, then hopefully some good have come of it. We've got over it. We've had such a successful year. We've had 19 or 20 meetings. We've had I think we'd had 19 meetings. We'd had 17 podiums. And in Europe, every meeting that we did, was a podium. We won the Dutch Championship round at Enram. We beat William. We'd beaten Venus in various places. We won Berghaupten. We won Angenrod. The list is endless. And the success that we've had it has been phenomenal, and that's not I'm not wanting to boast, but it's the truth. Going back to before, I wanted to do the British Championships in 2015, but we were in Waldorf with the World Team Cup, missed the British Championships, missed the European Championships in 16, then qualified for 17 and we came fourth in Tyac. Then in 18 we've come second at Velta, and then in 19 we've come third at Enram. So we've really put ourselves into the framework of those top teams in Europe, and it's not in question anymore. It's a really good feeling when you've done the work and things are starting to pay off. It is a good feeling.
Yeah, and obviously 2020 now is coming ahead of us, and all shaped up for a really good season for you. But it would be brilliant to win that British title, wouldn't it?
After what happened, I'm in two minds. Part of me goes, do you know what? I really don't care. But then part of me says, no, I've got a point to prove. And if we won it next year or the year after or at some point, it would make the feeling of winning it even sweeter. But to be honest with you, we want to go to Europe. The European Championships is on September the 6th in Pfarrkirchen, which is a 1,000-metre track. We're really looking forward to that. We're looking. We've got a contract for Herxheim on Himmelfahrt, which is I think it's the 21st of May. We're looking at doing Dingolfing, Plattling, and maybe Muldorf. So effectively, we really want to get our eye in on the 1,000-metre tracks and get the equipment absolutely pinpoint perfect, and get ourselves pinpoint perfect. And so we want to go to the European Championship and we want to win it. We've had fourth, we've had second, and we've had third. We haven't got long left. Paul and I are both getting on a little bit, but we don't feel it. We feel young, we feel hungry. The passion and desire is there. And when we're on the bike, the trust between us is absolutely immense. Paul, I've seen pictures of him with his head in the ground, looking the wrong way, and think to myself, that's absolutely crackers. I wouldn't even consider doing what he does. It's absolutely amazing, but for him to trust me to control us and ride us is massive, and my trust in him, because I don't, and this is the God's honest truth. I don't really know what he does. I've come from a different sport. He just does everything right. I can't ask for more than that, and I don't. Got a great relationship. We've got a great partnership, and that's what's bred the success.